That can be done in OB.
Okay, we've had our first award of a star. Who else would like a star? I warn there is a slight thing that comes with the star, which is an agreement to take action item level minutes. So do we have anybody who's willing to take action item level minutes? Stefan, would you wanted the star? I would put it on your Starbucks because it would. So will the star, I have to tell you. Okay, so Stefan has said he won't do it. We are still looking, therefore, for somebody to take action item level minutes. That means, okay, thank you very much. So we have a Jabber script. Now I have to ask you, what color? Okay, folks, it's 4 after. We should probably take our seats and get ready to go. We're going to have an adventure today, which is there are some last-minute edits going on to one side of the slide, so we're going to be presenting them live, so they may be updated even as you watch. That's going to be exciting. We apologize that there's no PDF version of the slides available for you just yet. We'll get them up as quickly as we can, and in particular, our apologies to anybody who's coming remotely. Welcome to Prague here at IETF 6. Oh, wait, wrong one. Welcome to Prague. No, still wrong one. Oop, a little ahead of ourselves. But I certainly do hope we come back for IETF 105 so we can see what they do in prep for the Olympics. This is the right one. Welcome to Prague here at IETF 93. And by the way, anybody in the room not seen the note well? Raise your hand and I'll sing it. Just kidding. I know all of you people. I warn you, I'll sing it to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and you'll be very, very sad by the end. All right, agenda day 1, Administrivia. You are here. We have found our Jabber scribe and our note taker, and we're very happy for that. Thank you very much to both of them. If anybody else is taking notes in the meeting and wants to send them to the chairs to help out, we'd love that, so please feel free. Our first item is there any agenda bashing for day 1? No. Okay, hearing no agenda bashing, the next step is to go through the draft status update. Here's the formal draft status. The data channel drafts are still in the RFC editor queue. The RTC web video is in the RFC editor queue. RTP usage is in the RFC editor queue, and stun consent freshness in IESG evaluation. The security drafts are in solicited review, which is not quite a formal draft status, but basically we have gone through publication requested, and all of the various directorates are being asked to do early review of them. and there's probably going to be one more rev before they go to ISG evaluation. All of the others are in ID exists. This is slightly less formal status for these advanced drafts. We have 3 in party status, 1 is waiting, and 2 are in keep calm and review the drafts. However, a very large number of them are in this state, which is ID exists. By the way, this is a very bad horror movie. If anybody is in the mood for really bad horror movies, exists. Who thought that was a good name for a horror movie? I don't know, but it is. That's the state of a lot of them. So we still have a lot of work to do. The fact that a few of us are in party mode does not let the rest of us off.
Can we get these graphics up on the tracker, please?
Can you get what?
The graphics up on the tracker.
Okay, at the next hackathon or code sprint, rather, we'll see what we can do. So we still have a lot of work to do, which brings us to kind of the rest of our agenda. Once back is JCEP. Which of the JCEP authors / editors is presenting? Oh, good. That's nice. I will switch to your presentation. Give me just a second.
And for remote people, the current copy of the slides have been uploaded to the PDF. You can find them there, and if they change, we'll upload them again.
All right. Next slide. Right. So we had the interim, and we made a bunch of changes since the interim, though not as many as maybe between the interim, between the IETF and the interim. But if you didn't have the interim, sorry about that. Say again. Series of modest changes, none of which really need too much detail. We had this long-suffering image adder patch from Harald that described how you're supposed to handle image adder, and it finally landed. So hopefully there should be some documentation about at least how RTCWEB points should handle image adder. There's still some questions about how they handle when they interact with non-JSON endpoints. There seems to be a lot of confusion in the text, around the text around how you're supposed to exactly what the bundle policies did. And so we spent a bunch of time clarifying that. I don't believe we changed anything substantive. We just made it clear what we always agreed on how it was supposed to behave. We'd gotten perhaps maybe a tiny bit aggressive in defining how CNAME worked, and we're contradicting the other existing documents, so we stopped doing that and just pointed out to RTP usage. There's now some text around lip sync, but again, there's some open issues there. And then we sort of finished the project of going through the various lines in the SDP and determining how they ought to be behaved. And so it turns out that the C line basically, once you're doing ICE, doesn't trying to check the C line against the ICE doesn't do anything useful and actually makes life worse, because if you read the 5245 processing, you're supposed to check the C line against the ICE candidates, and if it doesn't match any of them, you get ICE mismatch. And since ICE mismatch primarily exists to determine when ICE isn't going to work, and if ICE doesn't work, in RTCWEB you're screwed. And also we mostly trickle ICE, and so we're gonna have these C lines that are bogus, so that's not really very useful. Then we figured out we should do the B line, which is parse it. So I think we now have pretty much complete coverage on all the lines in the SDP that aren't A lines about what you want to do. So if you think we're missing something, please call that out. Next slide. Right. So Magnus went through this draft and sent us an extensive series of comments about how we'd screwed up. And one of the ways we screwed up was perhaps this lip sync stuff. So it turns out that 5888 says that when the offerer provides a series of MIDs for the LS group, the answer's options are limited to accepting some of them, all of them, or none of them, and not to adding any. And so this probably aren't. Sorry, it is the opinion of the authors of JSEP that these are not actually the greatest semantics in the world, and it would really be nice if the answer could actually add things to lip sync group. And so we sort of said, we're going to do that. And that made people sad that we're contradicting 5888. So So we're no longer allowing you to do that. And basically, we talked about, there's some suggestion you should be reoffering, but as this slide says, it screws up the M-line assignment algorithm. And our conclusion was basically that this is not something that's going to happen a lot, and we'll just have to live with it not being something you can really negotiate in JSAP. That is, you just have to live with what the offerer offered you, and that's too bad. So if people think this is like not okay, and they just actually have to define how to do this in some way, like now's the time to say that.
Jonathan Lennox. I mean, as I recall from the interim, it wasn't just that the answer couldn't add M lines, it's that the LS state couldn't be asymmetric between the two sides.
That's correct.
Yeah, but I feel like this is, yet another consequence of choosing to use SDP, and I don't think adding new M lines is actually not. I mean, yes, it's a fresh offer with a new M line that's unidirectional. I mean, maybe it's hard to implement, and if so, I'm sorry, but that's kind of what you have to do if you're assuming offer answer.
Hi, Alice John, disliker of LS groups. Well, friendly amendment. I made a suggestion in a tracker 2 hours ago that tweaks the language a little bit. The only problem you have is assigning tracks to media sections when you generate an answer. And I think we can do something that makes sense. In some cases, it might increase the number of cases where the answer has to make a new offer because they couldn't fit all these tracks into the SDP, but I think that's okay. So I think we're almost there, and see the tracker for what I suggested in detail.
So you might not want to sit down yet. The part that I'm really concerned about is that we have this sort of complicated thing of how do we take media stream tracks and assign them to M sections. And if now when doing this, we need to fully consider like what the current state of the lip sync stuff groups is, I think this algorithm is going to make it very complicated. Like unless someone can like come up with an algorithm that sort of, or like pseudocode for an algorithm of how this would actually work, like I'm not necessarily convinced by someone saying that this is not hard.
Martin Thompson, if this is for you the straw that breaks the camel's back, then we're already way past the point that this algorithm was far too complex. I've reviewed this code. We've been around probably about 7 or 8 times on the piece of code in Firefox that does this. And it is awful.
Okay,
what's one more? I mean, let's just double down on it. It's not actually that hard in this case. You go through your tracks one by one. You try to find somewhere where it fits. This is just another criterion for a given M section as to whether or not a track fits or not once you've made commitments on previous tracks. So you have an LS group that's been offered to you. It's got audio and video, for instance, and you have unsynchronized audio and video. You throw the audio in the first one, and that immediately means that the video track is unsuitable for use for your video track because you can't guarantee that they're synchronized. And so you go, well, I can't put it in there, and you have some leftovers at the end. And you fire on negotiation needed and crank the handle again. It's not actually that complex.
I'm not convinced unless without seeing like actual pseudocode here. Don't forget that
do you want us to write the code? I mean, we can do that too. I don't think this is that hard.
I don't think it's that straightforward. I think we also have this case where when you add a stream, you're getting back a sender that has an MID attached to it, and now all of a sudden, like the MID is going to change based on the lip sync group, whether it being compatible or not. I think this is actually very complicated, and our position is that this is truly an edge case of even encountering this at all, and we have reached the point where we need to be prepared to jettison edge cases.
Jonathan Lennox, I mean, it seems to me like I mean, I think I agree with Martin. This is basically, there's all sorts of reasons why, as an answerer, you might find that some of your media stream tracks can't go in the answer. He didn't provide you enough M lines. You've got 20 media stream tracks and he only gave you 3 M lines. And this is no different
Yes,
than that.
that's true.
Now, I guess the difference is that there's a JavaScript surface by which the offerer can say, prepare, 20 receive-only M lines in case he wants it. I don't think there's currently a way to say, prepare an unlip-synced M line in case he wants it. But maybe this is enough in edge case you don't care. And anyway, that's W3C's problem.
I mean,
Hi, Alvestron. I'm happy to to make the algorithm simpler by ditching LS groups, but that will make some other people unhappy. I'm also happy to try to write the pseudocode of what I have just suggested. I'm also happy to write the pseudocode, but within a day or two.
I mean, to be clear, this does not need to be normative text. We're not adding a new mechanism, right? We're saying this is how you do it already with 3064. So I guess I'm not clear on why, unless I'm missing something, I'm not clear on why JSON has to get into this game at all. The normative text? What's the normative text?
The normative text is the text in the generate answer section that Cullen is patching.
Okay, I'll take a look at that.
I mean,
We have Paul in queue. You can't
Paul?
see that probably.
you want to, or Blue Ghost, you want to comment?
All right. Did I just get the floor?
Yes.
My first time doing this with this live interaction. This seems to me this is one more time, indicating the folly of trying to match using bidirectional M lines to connect unrelated streams.
I do not disagree at all. We've been through this several times, and while life would certainly be easier if all M sections were unidirectional, that fails for some common cases of a phone call. So we've been unable to sort of square this circle in the past. If there's some other sort of treatment that we can come up with that would make sense here, I'm all ears. But basically at this point in time, we should be prepared to accept slightly imperfect solutions so that we can be able to be finished.
That imperfect solution being SDP.
And I guess it just depends on which which hack is the least pain. It seems like I understand that bidirectional case for for interoperation with traditional stuff, but why isn't that the special case?
Certainly something, we could go to the path where everything was unidirectional, and that basically what that would mean would be that even setting up a one-way or a phone call would require 2 offers, one to set up the send stream and the other to set up the receive stream. Because the first one would only have one M line, the second, and then you'd have to have a second offer by the callee to set up the second M line. You could have other options where you generate 2 M lines on the first offer, but I think there's going to be many sort of we'll be jettisoning one set of problems for another set of problems if we go down that path. Would be my concern, and at least these problems I feel like we know fairly well at this point.
Well, yeah,
so
that's
where we
true.
are.
Pardon?
Yeah. So, Martin Thompson, you're suggesting that if you cannot produce the LS groups that have been requested, fail. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
would you allow someone to succeed?
Yeah, I'm saying that, succeed in that, what happens is that you don't get the exact synchronization that you might have expected, and life goes on.
Oh, so you're saying that you would put unsynchronized tracks into an LS group, effectively?
No, I think it's the other way around, that tracks that you wanted to have synchronized would not end up synchronized, because
right.
That's
I'm happy with that. I'm perfectly happy with that outcome.
Right. That's kind of our philosophy, is that it's not optimal, but it's not the end of the world. And, the solution is, could be contended that it's worse than the problem.
Sure. I guess I can live with that, of that aspect of it. I would rather not put things in an LS group that, well, we'd have to go through the details. I just got up to note that there's a bug in the API. You cannot produce an MID for an RTP sender. So don't use that as the basis of rejecting the pseudocode or the option that I described.
Sorry, say it again?
You cannot produce an MID at the point that you add a track, in all cases, because you might not even be the one to generate the offer.
Sure. Well, let's talk about that later.
I just wanted to point it out. I think there's a problem there that we need to discuss.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, we chairs have a quick question for the room. Please hum now if you think you understand this problem. Ooh. Please hum now if you object to this way of going forward. I heard one Norwegian Do you want to go back to the microphone there and explain, or do you want to have us just declare you in the rough now?
Oh, I'm saying that what I'm saying is that the stuff on the screen is almost correct. If you accept my fix, it will be correct.
Sorry.
Basically say that when you assign tracks to groups, you have to consider whether you can fit all the tracks in the stream into the group. If not, you don't use the. You have to consider whether you fit all the tracks in the stream inside the LS group. If you can't do that, don't use also media sections. It's as simple as that.
I think Harold actually would volunteer to write some pseudocode for this, so.
Okay, so Harold, we have another meeting tomorrow. Any chance you're bored this evening and can write some pseudocode?
There's no chance that I'm bored, but I might write the pseudocode.
Okay, so if we get pseudocode tomorrow, we'll revisit this. No resolution at this point.
Okay, on that note, let's move on to some more interesting topics. Okay, so this was another thing that came up at the interim. We think we finally nailed down kind of how we want image adder to work. But one thing that was pointed out is how do we want to deal with portrait versus landscape in these also popular mobile devices? And I see Magnus stepping up to the mic. We basically said that CVO makes this problem go away, but what happens if the other side doesn't support CVO? And Magnus went to go chase this question down, and I'll let him speak to whether we actually quoted him accurately here.
Yeah, Magnus Westland. So what my understanding is happening is that there will be some activity in 3DPP to actually be crystal clear on this question and in their specification around CVO. So, and that hasn't happened yet, but I expect it to happen in the next meeting, 3DPP SA4 meeting, which is, I think, end of August or so.
I see. I thought from your email that you actually had contacted them and basically verified that they did see it the same way, but you're saying that's actually still pending.
I mean, the discussion, an informal discussion at the last 3DPP SA4 meeting seems to indicate that yes, it is like we think it is, but they're going to codify it in the next meeting. So
Okay, well, I will wait for the granite tablet with the engraving.
Bo Burman, I can confirm what Magnus said. And also complementing what you say there, a single image attribute in case you don't have support for CVO is expected to list both orientations.
Fantastic. So I'm going to take those two independent sort of confirmations as like guidance to move forward with this. Next. Yep. Engrave into stone. So previously we talked about the various bandwidth attributes and stuff, and I think we finally got just about everything figured out. But what I did want to have was a clear guidance to implementers, since we said we would support TIAS as our preferred way of indicating what bandwidth the other side wants to receive, but we'd also accept AS for backwards compatibility. And I wanted to give a very clear way to derive an approximate TIS from supplied AS. So this is the algorithm that Colin and I came up with. And while it is a rough approximation, nothing is stopping you from using TIS to specify the exact number that you want. Basically, it's going to be 0.95, to take out RTCP, and then subtracting like a rough estimate of the header and packet rate. Any concerns with this? No, those will be actually fixed constants. Well, I was trying to indicate where where the magic came from, right?
Magnus Westland. I mean, I'm fine with them being default values, but I think, it's an example of how we calculate this. If you actually have more accurate information than those default values, I think you should stick them in there. Especially about,
Well,
yeah.
Packet rate is not always known. Like maybe someone will fill in A equals max P rate, but that's not anything that we're requiring to be specified. And header size requires information from further other parts in the stack and may actually not be well known because the ice path may change at any point in time. The point of this is that we get a reasonable value from what was supplied in AS, and if you want something exact, well, you should have specified TIS anyway.
Okay.
Ronnie Evan. As far as I remember, they're not the same units, AS and TIS.
What do you say?
They're not the same units.
Yeah, I just noticed that now that the header size is in bytes instead of bits. That needs to be fixed. You know what I meant.
One is bits and 1 kilobit.
That too. Maybe through Fermi cancellation it actually works out. All right, carrying on. We'll fix the math and write this in stone.
So just, is there anybody from the room who, presuming the math gets adjusted to the same units, is objecting to this way forward? Okay, please mark it as accepted. Thank you.
Okay, so another question that was raised is we don't have any specific API knobs for unbundling, but is it legal for somebody who wants to mangle the SDP to actually do unbundling? In other words, take what's generated by create offer and then move stuff around so that stuff that was bundled by create offer ends up being unbundled. And I'm sure we could make this work, but the actual SDP mangling, ends up being fairly convoluted, where you have to change at least 3 different things. I'm recommending that we not permit this.
Martin Thompson, I am perfectly fine with this. I will note that you cannot stop someone from doing this. How can you avoid someone from basically telling the answerer that the offerer has not bundled
okay,
and telling the offerer that the answerer is not bundled?
Oh, you can, but so
Well,
right.
bundle
So,
only is not.
so some of these will work and some of them won't, right?
Yeah.
So if what you have is well, I can't remember the policy, but no bundle basically, right? Then the offer can then you can remove the bundle groups and the call will succeed, right? But if you apply the policy that isn't, there's like bundle, that has anything in bundle only, the call's not going to work, right?
Correct.
So yes, I think that
but you have the knobs there. You have the fobs necessary to.
So
arrange
what you can do is, yes, if you are the, so we can do two things. We can forbid you from changing these values on the thing you pass to set local, and
I would not lie to the thing that generated the SDP.
Right, exactly, right. Agreed, good. So, right, so if you do that, then anything that isn't marked bundle only, you will be able to pull out the bundle group by editing this on the way out the door, not the way back to yourself. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So my point was that you're not going to provide explicit support for this. You're not going to do anything in the API, and you're going to say that if you generate an offer or an answer with this stuff in it, you'll expect to see it when you see it in set local description.
That's right. And I think if you modify,
fine.
I think what I would say, and I think the general situation is that if we make no guarantees of what happens if you send different data into set local than out the door, like you're on your own.
Right. And we are actually talking here about a sophisticated attacker. This is not, we're not actually talking about trying to defend against an attack.
Yeah.
Chris, just a couple of questions for clarification. I assume what you mean here is that you send an offer and you suggest something to be bundled, because nothing is just bundling create offer. I mean, the answer can, of course, remove and do things, but what you're asking here is when you said a subsequent offer, you don't want to...
No. What we're saying is that
the answer must accept.
The offer, when the offer apply, the policy, the policy that's passed into the connection dictates what the configuration of the M lines is and the candidates and the bundle only flags. And you cannot change that in between create offer and set local. And if it creates an offer that is, and so if you wish to have things that are not in the bundle group, then you have limited capabilities to do that. In particular, if they are marked bundle only, there's no way to unbundle them.
Yeah, sorry. Obviously, I mean, if the answer doesn't accept something which is bundle only, it's going to be rejected, so that's not a problem. But what if the answer removes something from the answer? Say, I don't want to bundle this.
Yeah, that's fine. He can do that, but he can't do it for things that are in bundle only.
Of course not.
Yeah, right.
That's.
We are only talking about the offerer side here. We're only talking about the behavior of the JavaScript on the offerer side.
Jonathan Lennox. I mean, it seems like the thing you didn't put in your bullet points here in the alleged unbundling bundle only is it doesn't have any candidates, and you have no way of telling it to get candidates.
That's right. What you could have said was...
Yeah, I mean, anything which has candidates, I'd say anything which has candidates, you can unbundle. Anything which doesn't have candidates, there's no candidates there. You can't do anything with it.
But the point is that we could have designed this. You could design this in a way that said, if you're the JavaScript and you see and the guy generate and the browser generates an offer that has bundle only, you can remove bundle only, and then we'll make candidates for you. And we're saying you can't do that.
Yeah, I agree. That's stupid. Don't do that.
All right.
Okay, anybody have an objection with the proposal not to support this? Okay, seeing no objections, accepted.
All right, moving on. Okay, this will be fun. So this is another insight that Magnus had. We talked about image adder and what JSON clients would do, where they generate just a single image adder and a Q value about their maximum decoder limits typically. But we may receive image adders from other endpoints that may have multiple image adders where there are different Q values. And the question is, like, how do we pick what to actually do? And you could imagine a bunch of different things here. You can imagine trying to like best match on a variety of different things. But we want to have in JSF like a clear guidance on what implementations should actually do. So I'm trying to basically come up with a rule that's quite simple and easy to write down. So as a first cut at this, Eric and I sort of decided that the initial rule would be if there's multiple Q values, when sending you should pick the image adder with the highest Q value that doesn't require upscaling. So if you have a 720p source and you actually get an image adder that has a sort of minimum resolution of 1080p, you should skip that one and then move on to another one that has a compatible Q value.
Yeah. So Martin Thompson, I think Eka is going to talk about distortion.
Right. So in Magnus's comments on the bug, he pointed out that this could result in changing the aspect ratio. I guess I'm trying to think of what happens in our system if we feed an image adder with a aspect ratio that's not the aspect ratio of the input image, whether we stretch it or try to keystone it, or try to like letterbox or box it. Yeah, I guess. So so I think there, yeah, or polar box, I guess, depending which one. So I guess the question is, it's one thing to say. So the argument for not upscaling is it creates like really shitty visual artifacts that look bad, right? And the same is the argument for changing the aspect ratio if you stretch it rather than if you crop it or whatever, right?
Well, there's another argument for upscaling, which is that you're wasting bandwidth. Potentially as well. Sure.
I guess I can live with that rather than trying to figure out what the one with the right aspect ratio is. But I could also live with pick the one with the right aspect ratio that doesn't require upscaling with the highest Q. I can live with that as well. But I'm like trying to avoid it being really super complicated, and it's already kind of getting hairy.
And what happens if none of them match the aspect ratio?
Yeah. So Martin Thompson, this is another nice bike shed. I just got up to point out that should is probably not strong enough here. I think we should go with must, and I think we should say something about the distortion problem. I'd be happy with letterbox.
Yeah, or pillar box.
If other people or pillar box, if people are happy with that.
Yeah, I have basically the same, or the question. I mean, is there a reason why? I don't know the details of this, but is there a reason why we can't use must instead of should?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to be. We realized that, we didn't want to be overly didactic here in the case that we got this wrong and somebody had a better idea. But
Haraldsson +1 for not making circles into ellipses. Either if we can preserve the Q value, we should. If we can preserve the aspect ratio, we should. And if not, letterboxing is better than stretching.
Sure, but let's agree we'll never stretch, because nothing bothers me more than seeing like a human face with the wrong aspect ratio. And I'm only barely exaggerating when I say that. The thing that I think is difficult to say, let's try to match aspect ratio is you can imagine very pathological things where someone might have 720p at say you have 720p at 69. That's your native, resolution. And someone gives you a 720p at 4.3 with Q 1.0, and then 360p at 69 at 0.9. And which is more important in that case? Should we match on aspect or should we match on resolution? And you could probably find scenarios where either might be appropriate. And to come up with a single unambiguous rule of how to pick one or the other, we could spend a long time painting the bike shed. If someone is willing to make an argument that there is a single unambiguous rule, then great. This is the simplest unambiguous rule that we could come up with.
I think that as long as we stay with the principles of we're not going to squash people's heads and we're not going to create fake data, the rest is already all defined by the specs. We have to pick the highest Q value. You end up with exactly this rule. You end up with everybody that Mike's spoken to. There's nothing else really to discuss once you make those two decisions. So I think we're done.
Right, and that basically just means that. Nope. Waka waka.
I take it that means Randall put his hand down, but if somebody wants to tell me he's actually been eaten, we may close the meeting. So is there anybody else who needs to be at the mic line for this?
All right.
Okay, I'm reading that as the room is okay with this proposal. If you think I'm misreading it, please scream now. Okay, qualified Tomas. I'll sit on my hands.
So Adam Roach is clarifying that Jessup took his hand down because he agreed with what Colin said. Okay.
For the minutes, Burnett pointed out that we also need to say, don't squash people's heads. Squash people's heads.
Which explicitly means letterbox or pillar box to fit aspect. Well, this is where we ought to have very unambiguous behavior.
Yeah. So Martin Thompson, don't try the cropping thing. You can do face detection and take a 16 by 9 and turn it into a 4 by 3. And some products do that, and very effectively. But I'm not sure that we want this because we need to say must.
So to restate, the position that people are espousing is make up fake black data to make the thing the right aspect ratio.
So
I just said it turned away Cullen, but yeah, but don't crop letterbox or pillar box, depending.
Stefan Wenger. So the way how this was solved 20 years ago when it first cropped up in certain TV systems was they had an watermarking of a cross at a defined position. You know, you wouldn't see it typically in the coded video, but it is there when you examine the coefficients. So they basically had an in-band in the video bits information about the aspect ratio. That solved all the problems for good. Yeah. Of course, technology went forward, and smart video codecs include something like SEI messages, which include an aspect ratio, SEI message information, etc., but I will not go there now.
Right, and if just to be very clear, and if you don't want any pillar boxing, letterboxing, messing with the stuff, just don't include any aspect ratio thing in the edge editor.
Jonathan Lennox, I mean, I think it seems like it should also be possible for an advanced JavaScript application to figure out what this is doing, run its own face detection in JavaScript, and then do its own cropping in the in the rendering. And so maybe we should make sure that that the actual resolution of the stream being received is visible to the JavaScript, so that it has the information it needs to do that.
JavaScript applications won't advertise image adder with aspect ratio.
No. If they receive a thing with the wrong aspect ratio, so that you can fix it, and so that, yes, the standard behavior, is to pillar box and letterbox, but an advanced JavaScript application can figure out, hey, pillar box or letterbox is happening here. I don't like that, so I'm going to do something magic in my rendering code.
No, it's not on the rendering code. This is on the send side. This is what you're sending.
Oh, it's a send. Oh, I see.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, but I mean, you certainly can get things with the wrong aspect ratio if the video tag is a different aspect ratio than the incoming video, and then you're in his case.
Right. Okay.
Right. In almost all cases, the JavaScript has full discretion over exactly what fit it does on the rendering side. This is just for what is generating to something else that has expressed, hey, I want aspect ratio 69:43 or whatever. And if you ask for that sort of stuff and you don't get exactly what you want, well, then just don't ask for it. All right, so this is a projector, and we're trying to decide whether the pins should be blue or green on the connector. Yeah. Okay. Let's skip over this one to the next one. I want to come back and hit this at the end because this is the most complicated one. Okay. Let's go over this. This is just really, this we shouldn't need much time for. It's possible to call create offer during the state where you've received a PR answer from the other side. However, like in a state where you've received a PR answer from the other side, the only thing that can get you back to a different state is actually getting an answer from the other side that then returns you to stable state. So if you generate an offer, there's really nothing you can do with it at that point in time. However, it is very unambiguous about what create offer should do, because basically a PR answer is no different than an answer as far as actual JSF is concerned. And so generating an offer in this state is really akin to generating an offer in the stable state. So the question is really like, should create offer fail here? Or should create offer just basically give you something that, would fail when you give it the set and local description? And so the argument that, for allowing it to succeed is that like it doesn't cause any harm, and to actually prohibit this requires adding more state checks to create offer. The argument to not allow this is that like, well, it doesn't actually do any good. Our suggestion is that, we just do the simplest thing that doesn't require anything to the code or do any additional state checks. Just let it succeed. It'll generate its thing. And then like, if you try to use it, it'll do the wrong thing. But we don't have, it prevents us having APIs that sometimes work and sometimes don't, that usually don't have any side effects like that.
Christer Holm, do you happen to have you drawn a state machine which actually supports this?
The create offer doesn't have a state machine. That's the whole point. Create offer and create answer, they always work. Well, create answer requires an offer, obviously, but they always work regardless. The create offer always works regardless of what state the state machine is in. And I think that's the easiest way to kind of think about things. Set and local description and set remote description, of course, always their functionality is contingent upon what state the state machine is in. So this doesn't add any states. This doesn't add any new state machines. This is just sort of maintaining like create offers independence of state.
So basically, when you receive a per offer, you would call set local, right?
Sorry, I missed that.
So when you receive a provisional answer,
right?
You're calling set.
We receive PR answer, you call set remote description with the PR answer that you received. And that puts you into the remote PR answer state.
Yeah. And then when you call create offer again,
right, it's not clear why you would.
It will create an offer, and that offer will be sent, and then when you receive the answer to that.
No. So like you're in this, you've applied the remote PR answer, and you're in the remote PR answer state. Now, there's no reason why you would call create offer at this point in time, like on negotiation needed, won't fire here or anything like that. But if you did, then like it would succeed. And then if somehow you tried to call set and local description with that, like it would just explode and you would get an error.
I'd like some more time on this, because what if you create this, assuming you call this create offer again, and then you get the provisional answer to that also.
No. So you can't actually, like, when you call this offer thing, like, you can't actually set it to set local description. So like this thing, like, is only generated for informational purposes at that point in time.
Oh, okay. So sorry. So you get the provisional answer, you call a new create offer, but what is that offer then based on?
Well,
I mean,
but the point is here that is like, what should the API do? It's not saying that this is a new path that we're endorsing, saying you should definitely do this. You wouldn't do this, but the question is like, should it fail if you try to do this?
I'd allow this, John. If the only reason to call create offer was to send it to the other side and to put it into set local, we could forbid it, but it's not. It's a bit sad, but at the moment, create offer is way to query the internal state of the peer connection. Like figuring out, if I wanted to send an offer now, how many M lines would it contain? So I think we should do the simple thing, leave it legal, because people want to look at that as SDP and they don't want to think about when they can get at it.
Right. I mean, to be clear, there's general agreement that sending this offer is very stupid and you should not do it. We're only talking about whether you should be allowed to generate the offer. You can't set local it because it's forbidden, and if you send it, you're a dumbass. So all we're saying is it's like not worth the trouble stopping the browser stop you from doing it.
I find Harold's reasoning there to be quite compelling and a way of sort of expressing the general sense I had that I really couldn't articulate. So thank you for that, Harold.
Okay, just from a queue management perspective, we're going to.
Yeah, I'm the marker for Paul and Tim. I'm here so that they can speak.
Oh, okay. I was going to say we were going to take you and then them, but if you're the marker for them, we'll take them and then the rest of the local.
What kind of Pac-Man has two blue ghosts?
Hi, I'm not sure I fully understand what this is about, but I'm wondering if you're allowed to do this, and then you're not allowed to do set local at that point, but if the state then changes and to the point where you receive an answer or whatever, and now you can send, now you're allowed to do set local. Can you set local with this one?
Possibly.
That you
yes.
created previously?
If it's consistent with the current state, then yes, you can.
And will it give you an error if it isn't consistent with the current state?
Yes. Well, although like Eric may have a different opinion, but consider this case. You sent out offer A, you got back PR answer B, and then you got back a final answer that actually happened to be exactly the same as B. Now, if you had generated a new offer C while you were waiting for that final answer, that should still work after the final answer B was installed, or B was installed as a final answer because it was generated in response to B as a PR answer. But Eric?
Well, to be clear, there's no guarantee that will work at all because it may work, but we don't have to. It doesn't have to be rejected by the browser, but because the guarantees of resource allocation only apply for the duration of the call. If it may be the case in the meantime, some other peer connection has grabbed the encoder and you can't do it. So it might happen to work, but it's certainly not guaranteed to work.
Yes, I mean that's what I was sort of trying to encapsulate with if the state is consistent.
Okay, never mind.
Tim's next.
Right. So I'm just wanted to really extend what Harold said. I think there are occasions when you might want to look at this. You might want to look at the fingerprint or the codex or whatever. So there are occasions where it might conceivably be useful, and I don't think we should stop it. But obviously, you don't want to actually use it to do set local. It would be nice if there was some kind of warning in the text to that effect, and I think it would also be nice if we knew if you got an error message back from set local that was like something that told you that you were being done. But I can live without either of those things.
So, I mean, the error you would get back in this case would be that the state is bad, that you're not able to install an offer because the state machine's in the wrong state.
Are there not instances where the state machine could be in the right state, but it's not a possible offer? So if you go back to the lip sync semantics, you might be in a state where it's now no longer plausible or something. I mean, I can't think of the detail.
Right, agreed.
Okay, so I think we should go with this.
Okay, I think we should go with this too. The reasons Harold said, but there is a real need for this. Remember that create offer is our way of discovering capabilities. So if you're only calling really get capabilities, which is the euphemism, or this is the euphemism for, then if you want to sample changing capabilities and understands what's going on, this is why you'd use it. So there is a real reason to have this. And back to if you wait a long time with any offer and then try and set it local, you're playing with fire. That's not recommended. But get capabilities is useful.
Christopher, I'm okay to go with this for now, but I may come back on the mailing list and because I want to see the text because there won't be any text. Like the only text that will be added here would be to prohibit this, and since we are recommending not prohibiting it, there will be no new text. Well, let's put it this way. I may read the text, the text that you have, or I may ask a question, what about this and that use case? But anyway, I'm okay with it for now, but just to let you know that there may be some questions coming. Sure.
Okay, we will obviously confirm all of the decisions that you're recording as our scribe on the list. So, but it's good to know that at least at the moment you don't have an issue.
Martin Thompson, I'll point out that you can actually use this because you can take the answer, the provisional answer, turn it into a real one and transition back to stable and then just slap the damn thing down. It does work. As long as, of course, some other thing hasn't changed in the meantime, but usual caveats apply.
Are there any other comments on this point? Right, to confirm on the mailing list, but at the moment the theory is that the spec will remain silent on this point.
Okay, next slide. Oh yeah. All right, so Magnus, again, found an interesting case that we had not previously considered. If you have a single SSRC that basically fixes the clock rate for the SSRC, and otherwise you'll get sort of weird timestamp jumps if you switch from previously sending something like PCMU with an 8 kilohertz clock rate to Opus with its 48 kilohertz clock rate. So the question becomes, what if on the send side you want to change between PCMU and Opus? Now, this does not require a reoffer because you're just making, the remote side has already advertised its capabilities as saying, hey, I can receive either PCMU or Opus. So you've already said with A equals SSRC what SSRC you're planning on using, but now you want to switch codecs. Well, there's only a couple ways out of this. One of them is that you switch to a new SSRC, but this is difficult because you've already signaled what SSRC you're going to use, and the other side may be expecting to use that for DMUX. The second way would be like we get rid of this A equals SSRC signaling, but that can lead us down to a whole bunch of other problems that I haven't previously considered. And the third could just be that, well, if you switch codecs like this, you'll get sort of weird timestamp jumps, and just so we'll have to deal with it. And after thinking about this a bunch, our recommendation is that we warn people about the effects of changing codec, and say that, well, there will be RTP timestamp jumps, but since implementations already have to deal with this from pre-existing things that didn't try to be 7190 compliant, like, it's not like this will be the end of the world. And we can consider this again in the future about whether maybe we want to still use A equals SSRC once we understand, what the implications of that are.
Jonathan Lennox, a fourth possibility would be if you have an M line with codecs with n distinct clock rates, signal n SSRCs for that M line. And swap among them. Why not?
The RFC requires you to change to new SSRC and buy the old one as soon as you're switching. So I try to remember when this was brought up, and I don't. But
so you can switch back to an old SSRC as long as it makes sense in timestamp continuity and in sequence numbers, right?
Please remember to say your names when you come to the mic.
Sorry about that. So the problem with switching back to an old SSRC we're using is if your timestamp offset between the timestamp and the NTP clock changes, right? You need to keep that in sync as you keep using a new SSRC, right? And you also need to make sure you use the right sequence numbers so that you don't, insert a gap, meaning there was loss or anything like that. So if you're careful, you can switch back to a previous SSRC, no problem.
Chris, just a stupid question. Why do we need SSRC to begin with? I mean, For example, you say here that once MID is better understood, but for example, bundle already mandates the usage of the MID in the RTP and RTCP package. So I mean, are we needed? Okay.
So just to Martin Thompson, just to be clear, we currently rely on SSRC to demux when things are bundled. Now, that's because we haven't implemented the header extension necessary to support the MID thing. Once we actually have that, then there's a possibility that we could get away with changing SSRCs and not signaling them. But in the current moment, we need it. Krista asks, do you think we might have this moment? I cannot speculate on what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, my concern is that until we get implementation experience, we might not be aware of like edge cases and stuff that might exist with this path. And so like we're not forbidding this in the future. We are just saying this is an edge case, and let's be careful not to come up with solutions to edge cases where the solution creates more problems.
Magnus Westland. So first I want to comment on Simon. It's the RFC that's for this change which says that you must basically stop using it. Otherwise, I agree that technically you can do it if you're careful, and it's actually not that difficult, I think, to get it right. But yeah, it's the current RFC on this which we mandate through RTP usage prohibit us to keep this, to go back to the same SSRC we had before. So I agree with it in some cases. It's really a question if you're going to find some use case where you need to switch a lot between the payload types back and forth. I think and for like Opus to G011, I don't see the need, because if you're using Opus, you can regulate the bandwidth across the whole range anyway. So, and you wouldn't need to do it for rate control and things like that. So, yeah.
So I think what we need to do is override that RFC, is override that sentence in the RFC that says you cannot use a previous SSRC. We need to say you can use it, but it has to make sense. Timestamps have to be continuous. It's easy to do, and it solves all problems, and it means we can signal everything.
So just to make sure I understand, you're suggesting like signaling, SSRC for each clock rate.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to sort of I'm not a big fan of that suggestion, because I think that the ultimate solution that we probably want here is actually moving away from A equals SSRC once we've had more time to actually contemplate the side effects of it. And I think that signaling multiple SSRCs actually kind of pushes us in the other direction.
And what direction is that?
Becoming more dependent on A equals SSRC.
Yeah,
because like in addition to A equals SSRC, we're also going to have A equals SSRC group to associate RTX with A equals SSRC. And are we going to have a separate like RTX SSRC for each of these SSRCs that are going to be signaling? Like potentially, or FEC.
I think FlexSpec has solved the problem for FEC, and you're probably not going to be RTXing audio. Or maybe you will, but it seems weird. There is a lot of weird here. I agree. People do weird things. I don't think that having multiple A equals SSRCs. I don't think that's. Because I think that the ultimate, midtopia you'd get would have multiple SSRCs when you switch. I guess you wouldn't be reusing, maybe, but if you didn't feel like it. So I don't see why having multiple ASRCs moves us further in a direction as opposed to keeping us where we are. I don't think the A equals SSRC draft. I think the SSRC draft always anticipated that you'd list all the SSRCs, but that was back when we thought the future was Plan B. So.
Chatterjee, just a clarifying question on what the limitation shape would be. So what I read between the lines here is that you would document that this is a foot gun and say, don't use the foot gun. And if you find out somebody else used the foot gun, reoffer. because that's what's going to get you out of this getting weird timestamps. Is that the approximate shape of the document delimitation?
No, no. I'm not sure we'd say it's a foot gun. I think we'd say that it has side effects that may or may not be unpleasant if you're not expecting them. I think in most cases it'll be not a big deal.
So you want to document what the side effects are, and the solution you're offering for people who detect that it is causing them a problem is reoffer. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure I understand the shape of the proposal.
Adam wrote, mostly was going to propose what I think Ted was inferring, which is that we should go ahead, since this is such a remote corner case, and swallow the renegotiation if we need to do this, which is effectively the same thing.
Peter Thatcher. I was just going to comment on Jonathan's comment that FlexSpec is another example of how we're moving away from the need for signaling SSRCs. So I like the idea of what you have proposed.
Sorry, can you say that again?
He brought up FlexSpec, and FlexSpec is an example of another thing that we're working on that hopefully in the future will make it so we don't need to signal SSRCs. So it's another example for the second bullet point you have there under the proposal.
Okay. Do you agree with the sentiment that if we signal each clock rate with its own SSRC, that's like the limit of the grossness, that we don't need to have, if you say we're not going to do RTX for audio, that FlexSpec doesn't require SSRC group for grouping, the primary and FEC SSRCs?
I don't know if I completely understood the question I was coming
So, obviously, one of the things I'm worried about with going down the path of signaling multiple SSRCs, one for each clock rate, is that we'd also have to signal either multiple FEC SSRCs or an SSRC group that tied each of those primary SSRCs back to.
I am worried about that, but I'm saying with FlexSpec and MID and ESID, we're moving to a world where we don't need to signal the SSRCs to signal the streams. So we wouldn't have this problem at all. So I was just emphasizing that the FlexSpec is another point in favor of the future not needing to signal SSRCs.
So overall, you agree with the sentiment that if once we figure this stuff out, we could probably get away from this, and
yes.
You think we're on the right path. Good.
Yeah.
So Tim Terrybear from Mozilla. I just wanted to say I think you meant RFC 7160 because 7190 is something very different. But you can't just override the sentence in that RFC because the RTP usage document says in this specific case you must follow this thing from 7160, and that is the only reference to 7160 there is. So you could delete that from the RTP usage document, but
So Simon, did you have something? Because you're the last person in line.
Yeah. So assuming 7160 is Mark's RFC, yes, exactly. When you say document delimitation, it's very important, just a comment, don't lower the bar. So don't allow changing clock rates within one SSRC. It's very important that we continue prohibiting what 7160 prohibits.
Well, we wouldn't be prohibiting it. We'd be saying, if you do this, here's what you can expect in terms of side effects.
Let's not do it. Don't do it. That's the point. Otherwise, things will break.
Things just did this before, and our 7160 existed, right? So, right. But we say, hey, you're adults. Here are the things to be, aware of.
So let me just take a sense of the room here. Is there anybody who's deeply unhappy with the idea that what we're going to do here is document the limitation, explain what you should do if you see this behavior, and move on in version 1.0 with that? Anybody who doesn't like that way forward, please get up. I wasn't going to say just stand, but if you want to get to the microphone, Adam, you get to go to the microphone.
Well, Adam Roach, and there's a clarifying question, which is, so you're talking
about if someone does this thing, which really shouldn't happen, here's how you respond. Is there and don't do this?
Yeah, no, it's not so much a don't do this as a, hey, understand if you do this, these are what, so let me put it in terms I understand. Abstinence-only education does not work. We don't say don't do this, we say you will get an STD and possibly a baby if you do this. If you are looking for the baby, here's how to avoid the STD. And if you'd like to avoid both the STD and a baby, do this. So we're not just going to say don't do it, we're going to explain what happens if you do it to encourage them to behave responsibly.
Yeah, Ted, as much as I love your analogies, that clarified nothing for me.
Okay. Do you want me to bring in either an STD or a baby? Would that help?
Yeah, we're good. We're fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm now going to cut the line after Bernard because obviously I'm making things worse here. But Bernard, you're going to have the last word on that.
I could give a more literal interpretation of what I think the text will say, if that would help. Would basically be that here are the issues that that you may have, people may get confused by the change in clock rates. There's an issue, the workaround is that, you can re-signal or re-offer with the new A equals SSRC, and that provides the guidance, I think that Ted was trying to speak to, in somewhat abstract terms. And then, we will also, I think, as Peter was saying, I think as we gain more implementation experience, there's always the chance that we may come with a different solution based on the MID, ESID stuff that would then make this all go away. And if not in 1.0, probably in a future version of the spec, that's what would actually happen. But for now, we'll at least stay with the simplest thing, which is here's what we know will definitely work: education and providing the re-signal sort of option if that's necessary.
Christer, if we agree, and I haven't heard any objection, that the future, whenever it's going to be available and implemented, is the MID, are we still going to, in our specification, mandate the inclusion of the SSRC attribute? Because if we do that, that will be there, forever until we do, BIS.
Yeah, so this is a question for the BIS, right? We're not going to worry about BIS until we finish this version.
Bernard, I like much of what you've said, which is to say what it is you can do, and also what you. But I would. The easiest thing is to just say that switching between rates isn't supported, right? Unless you do a reoffer. I just say that. Then you wouldn't have to bend around it and try to show ways of doing it that really aren't non-standard.
I think that's what Simon was actually saying too. So, that's the other thing would be to say no and be didactic about it. I'm fine with that. That would be two different paths of one saying, discourage, and one, would be implementations must not.
Okay, so we're going to take a hum now to see who's in favor of the simple thou shalt not, and then who's in favor of the document, but understand that it may occur.
Or maybe should not, or something like that.
Okay. So if you would like to have this be a statement in the document which says you must not switch between clock rates, please hum now. If you would like the document to explain what the issues are and explain what to do in response, please hum now.
And just for clarity, there was a hum on the first option from the Jabber room.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, what? There's a comment from the front that the second group had better harmony. I think I concur with that. I definitely heard some nice tonal aspects to the second group. However, I did not hear a clear consensus for either one. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to write the text that would be the discouraged version of this, and we'll take the question to the list with that text in hand. Okay.
Okay, so let's move on to something else. Hopefully this one will be easy. This is a bug that was brought up the other day, that we may end up needing to have multiple equals fingerprint lines. I'm just sort of trying to put what I think the proper resolution is here, make sure I get it into the text right. Basically saying that for each supported hash algorithm, we generate A equals fingerprint, and then when we get a actual certificate in DTLS, we verify that it matches any hash algorithms that we know about, or whatever is actually chosen. That it matches at least one of the fingerprint lines. Eric, does this match your?
This is actually quite correct. Rather, I think what you want to do is the problem. So you may have multiple certificates with the same hash algorithm too. Is the point? So you might have, for instance, a certificate signed with P256, ECDSA P256 with SHA-256, and then you may also have a one signed with RSA and SHA-256. And so I think at some level what you need is the cross product of all the hash algorithm certificates. What you really need, but basically each certificate. I mean, it's not different hash algorithms. Each certificate needs to be represented, and then you do a lookup.
So the cross product of multiple certificates times multiple possible hash algorithms. Okay. Okay.
The rules say that the fingerprint has to be the hash algorithm used to produce the cert. So each cert implies a hash algorithm. So the cardinality of it is the rule nevertheless. But the point being that you simply iterate through certificates and you hash them with the hash algorithm of the cert, and you stuff an equals fingerprint, and on receipt you basically iterate through it. You take the certificate that you hash it, and you look to see if it's one of the entries in the list. If it is, you're good. If it's not, you're fine.
And one little thing, if you're not using MUX, then you have to use the certs of both the DTLS things and match both of them, right?
You're saying that you might end up with a situation where if you were not muxed, you ended up with two different different certs on.
I don't think it says anywhere that it's prohibited, does it?
I think we should prohibit it. I think we should require that if you can negotiate, at the end of the day, the other side provide one certificate view.
So, Martin Thompson, we don't depend on that. And in fact, I don't see any reason why we would require the extra checks. If the RTP uses one certificate and the RTCP uses another certificate,
I guess
and they're both authenticated by the same IEP,
I guess you're right. It just seems like odd, but I guess you're right.
Yeah, so the hash agility thing is kind of interesting in this context because it doesn't matter very much what the hash that's used to generate the certificate is. It matters more what the hash we use to generate a fingerprint is, because the certificates are just public key containers.
Yeah.
So I think that, as Jonathan had just apologized for requiring that they match, we could break that rule. I did write a draft about it once.
But if we wanted, you could just generate multiple certificates with the same keys in different digest algorithms.
Sure, why not?
I'm just saying, that would be easy. That would be
the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. If what you wanted was runnable hashes, just do it that way.
Except if, discussion yesterday in the CFRG led me to conclude that you can't just arbitrarily pick hash algorithms to sign with. So
yeah, I'm not overword at this problem. I think
yeah, I think this is largely academic, actually.
Yeah.
So I would rather just say generate an A equal fingerprint line for each certificate, and be done with it.
Yes. Using the hash algorithm in the cert.
Using whatever hash algorithm you felt like.
Well,
256.
I mean, we're not going to override the other RFC, right?
Sure. Let's not override that.
I'll put some PR for this. Yeah. I know what we want.
Okay. Noting, of course, that if we're mandating behavior on browsers here, we should be mandating the use of a particular hash algorithm for this.
And if you don't understand, you get RSA and ECDSA, and you don't understand one of them, you only validate the ones that obviously that you know about.
Yeah, I mean, the other side has two certificates. They're going to end up negotiating one or the other, and so then you just basically, and so it has to have. And so what you do is you compute the DTLS, you do the DTLS exchange, You look at the certificate, you digest it, and you look to see if that value appears in the list in the list of things you received. Dr. Jennings.
To Bernard's point, I want to make sure that we don't lose the case from working where the audio and video on the far end are completely different devices with different certificates and are sitting there. It sounds like you just agreed that would work fine.
Well, but we have not lost that, but bear in mind that JSEP prohibits doing that. Yes.
I mean, gateway, like two SIP things would have been merged to
right, but JSEP prohibits the browser omitting that.
Yeah, of course, yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no, it should work otherwise.
Yep. Okay, sounds perfect.
As long as you don't bundle, obviously. Yeah.
Small Perrault. If you understand all the hash algorithms that are provided, do you check all of the lines?
No, because each hash algorithm, each line corresponds to a separate certificate.
Okay, but suppose you have one certificate and multiple.
It's impermissible because because the hash has to correspond to the hash in the certificate.
Okay.
I mean, it's a dumb rule, but it's convenient at this particular conversation. Okay. Krister.
One of the things we're going to discuss tomorrow is when you have to reestablish a DTLS association, and one of the criteria for that is if the fingerprint changes. So assuming that you're sending an offer with this multiple the multiple fingerprints, and you do whatever you do, and then you're going to send at some point a subsequent offer. Are you again going to include multiple A fingerprint lines? And if you do, how do we really know whether the previously used selected fingerprint is used or not? How do we know whether we need to reestablish a DTLS association?
If we're discussing this tomorrow, let's discuss it tomorrow. I mean, I think that that's really a problem. Then that's really a problem that we should consider, like having explicit indication, not.
I mean, my general sense is that we now go from comparing a single fingerprint line to comparing a vector. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Tim, you're up, and then we're going to call the question.
So, Tim Panson, just wanted to check that there's no interaction here between this and the identity assertion corner. Does that trip anything up?
Yeah, Martin Thompson, I can answer that. We require that the identity assertion includes every A or fingerprint line that appears in the entire SDP.
So all rather than one.
All rather than one, yes. Which means you can't sneak in a non-authenticated line in that session.
Okay, Jonathan, I'd actually technically cut the line. Is it quick?
Yeah, I was going to say is I think the solution to the when you have to redo DTLS is when the fingerprint you for this you actually ended up using disappears from the set is when you need to change. Yeah, the ones you don't use you don't care. They're irrelevant.
Okay, so it sounds like with the clarifications that we now understand which hasher algorithm is used because we have to match the hash in the certificate, that we have a way forward here. If you have a strong objection to it, please shout the phrase Akira or the name Akira now. Okay, I don't hear Akira being called to the microphone, so I think we have an answer here.
Okay, let's go back in time to the number 15. Okay, so let me sort of give the background for the problem here, which is that we want to give a very clear mechanism for how we can do early warm-up of ICE and DTLS. We talk about it in section 4.1.4.1. And in order to do this, like the callee needs to provide an answer back with like the ICE candidates and DTLS fingerprint to allow ICE and DTLS to get warmed up. Now, one way you can imagine doing this is through a PR answer before you get the final answer. And we are actually discouraging this because I'm going to use a state machine in like this half-open state, and we're trying to get away from that because the caller can't update the offer at that point in time. So the mechanism that's recommended here is to do an offer, and then have the callee provide an answer with the A equals inactive directional attribute that it prevents media from being sent, but allows ICE and DTLS to be started. And then subsequent to that answer, once the call is actually accepted, the callee would generate a new offer, setting the direction attribute to send receive, and that would cause media to start. While talking about this, we have some comments that this would actually lead to signaling media race and clipping at the caller, because as a result of receiving the A equals inactive answer from the callee initially, if the callee started sending media toward the caller, it would then be discarded until the new send receive offer is accepted. So I can just reiterate that. The caller placed an offer, and the callee responded to it saying A equals inactive, which allowed ICE and DTLS to start. But somehow, as a result of the A equals inactive answer, the caller will not play out, decided it wouldn't play out media until I actually got a new offer saying equals send receive. And so we get a signaling media race. And so first I want to sort of see if this is actually true. That will implementations that received an A equals inactive offer fail to render media that they've received?
Simon Perrault, in my implementation it's true.
Okay.
It will just go to dev null.
Okay.
Jonathan Lennox, you seem to be, I'm not sure where this media comes from, since the other side received an A equals inactive, so they're not allowed to send. What?
This is the callee sending toward the caller. The callee, the caller said A equals send receive. So they thought, hey, I'm good to receive. But then the callee said, hey, A equals inactive.
Right.
And then the caller from that said, oh, I'm not going to send media, and I'm also not going to receive media. And so the question is then, if the callee sends this new offer and media at the same time when the call is accepted.
Well, that's illegitimate. He hasn't gotten an answer saying it's okay for him to send media.
Well,
but maybe the guy really wants the media to be stopped. Maybe this isn't a special early. Maybe this is just a special early state. Maybe he wants all the streams to be on hold for
Well, the caller never said he wanted the streams to be on hold.
I know the callee said he wanted the streams to be on hold.
Sure.
And he hasn't said. You haven't heard otherwise yet. So if he wanted to be receive only, he should have said receive only or send only.
Okay, so I'll get to that part in the next slide. But the first is just to establish that this is actually the proper understanding of the problem, and then we can figure out if we agree on that, then how we can properly solve it.
So just speaking to this problem, lots of SIP PBXs are back-to-back user agents which play around with phones. So when they're doing a transfer from one set of media to another, there's a state where you're trying to say you shouldn't be getting media from this phone and you should be getting media from that phone. And in that state, if you get into the bad case where you get media from both phones at the same time because of timing race attacks on the other phones, you want to make sure that this phone receives the right one. So any phone that has that problem will implement this, which is pretty much what the spec says. So I suspect that at least across IP phones, this is widely implemented, that if it's set it inactive and they receive media, they just silently discard that because that's what they're trying to do.
Okay. And so this is the thing that leads to potential media clipping because the send receive offer is in play, and Jonathan even says it's not even legal to send it until you get the 200 the answer. So okay, next slide. So we have a solution for this, but you may not like it. Next. All right. So let's say that instead of sending A equals inactive in the initial answer, the calling instead said A equals send only. And so in this case, the caller's perspective is that it cannot send media to the callee, which is fine because we don't want the caller talking while the phone is still ringing. But this would allow the callee to send media toward the caller as soon as the call is accepted. That without even having to wait for the new offer answer handshake to complete, basically the callee could start sending media toward the caller at the same time it sent the new offer to ask the caller to start sending media. So that's all good, but the problem is that the callee cannot supply A equals send only to set and local description during the sort of early warm-up phase because sending A equals send only to set local description will cause it to actually start transmitting. So what we would have to do here is that the actual answer that's provided would have A equals send only, but what goes to set local description would have to be A equals inactive on the callee side. And in a word, this is pretty gross. Yes, exactly.
Jonathan Lennox. So I still don't quite understand the problem you're trying to solve here, because if you wanted to be able to send media as soon as the DTLS handshake is done, then you should have said send receive.
The situation is you're trying to parallelize the sending the media with the prompting the user for answering the call.
Right.
Justin, present all three of the slides to the solution before we jump into the discussion. I think that'll be slightly easier.
Yeah, this might have benefited from a diagram, but just restating the problem statement. The point is to establish ICE and DTLS while the call is still ringing. And then as soon as the caller accepts, all they basically have to do is start transmitting media, and there's no additional sort of answer delay, no voice clipping. So that's the general problem we're trying to solve. And really the issue is, what API fobs, what sort of sequence of API calls do we make to actually allow this to happen? And it turns out this is harder than we expected. Peter.
So why couldn't the application just use some kind of RTP sender.pause?
Well, that you should hold that comment for the next slide.
Unless you add a media stream, you can't even convince the answer to generate anything with a send in it, right? That is, that what causes the pure connection to generate M lines that have send in them is adding an outgoing media stream to them. So, I mean, you got to solve that problem first before you even talk about what garbage you put in the SDP.
Right. So this is presuming that we do that. And just to head off some other possible comments, people might say, well, so what happens if you don't attach a media stream? Well, then you can't even get send and receive behavior. What happens if you set the enable to false? Well, then you still send RTP packets that are just muted or black or whatever, and that's suboptimal for various reasons. Is there some other API that you can call for paused? Not yet, but that's where next slide is going to go.
Actually, could I ask the folks in line, be okay with waiting until we're into the next slide before further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so again, this is sort of an API problem that we have. That we want to basically, what we want to do is tell the caller not to send us media, but to be prepared to receive media, and then just have the callee actually not start transmitting that media until it clicks the accept button. So how are we going to do that? Next slide. All right, so enter RTP sender and receiver, which are providing us the right affordances for this. And so if we send A equals send only in the initial answer, this allows the caller to be set up for playing out media as soon as it arrives, but not sending us media, which is exactly what we want. And we can accomplish this by setting the .active property on the RTP receiver. And this then will then translate to, when we call create answer, A equals send only. Now, how do we actually make sure the media doesn't get sent by the callee? Well, what we can actually do, this is not the clearest way of explaining it, but we have this thing of RTP encoding params. And basically, this is a way that we can do a lot of interesting things, like deciding which simulcasting layers are on or off. But we can also use it in this case. And so we have the .active thing of saying whether a given sort of SSRC is on or off. And what we can do here is initially not transmit media. We can set everything up, but set .active equals false to not transmit media. And then when we decide that we actually want to start sending media, upon actually accepting the call, we set this true. And then we also set RTP receiver active to true. And then we send our new offer that'll cause it to send and ask for send receive. And then the caller will actually be able to start sending media the other way. So this should actually have been true and false initially, but the thing is, we were looking for one API point to do both things, and what we end up needing is having two API points. One to control whether or not that the other side should send us media, like the directionality attribute, and the second one to control whether we're actually transmitting media. And so, fortunately, with RTP sender and receiver, we get this the distinct API points that we need to accomplish this. Thank you.
Krista, this seems to be, back in the days we did preconditions with SIP. Basically meaning, I'm not suggesting we should use that here, but basically the idea was the same. You need to make sure you have all your resources available before you even alert the callee. So I mean, is there a reason why you can't simply do that? You establish a DTLS and then you alert him, and you won't have any, because you don't know, again, if you're communicating with a non-JSON entity, you don't know what he's going to send in the answer, right? That he's going to send only, he can send whatever, as long as it's compliant with 3264. So this maybe would work fine between two browsers, but
no, it doesn't. Because this is all behavior on the callee side. So this assumes the callee is a browser, and if the callee is not a browser, then it doesn't matter, because this is like guidance for what the callee should do when it is a browser. But the caller could be anything. This just requires that the caller support 3264.
Hey, Eric Scola. I just want to make sure. I just want to work through the order of the order of events here, right? So I get I get an offer, and it's going to send receive in it by hypothesis, and then I apologize again talking API space, but here we are. So you get on track added, and you set and you use that to access the RTP receiver, and you set that to false, and then you somehow add a media stream, an outgoing media stream, and add that, and that gives you an RTP sender, which you set, which I guess you also set, which I guess you must also set to false, because you're not ready to send yet, right? And somewhere in here you generate an answer.
Slightly different.
Yeah, walk me through the sequence then.
What's that?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So there are two different things.
Yes.
Like, am I transmitting media or not?
Mm-hmm.
And am I generating a different directionality attribute than send receive?
Agreed.
And the fact that these two things were conflated in the previous slide was what led to tiers. And so here we are separating these things. The RTP receiver.active basically controls whether or not you're going to be send only or send receive. And you could also imagine a similar property on the sender that would toggle between send receive and receive only.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, let's just say that let's just take this case. The receiver toggles you between send receive, or the active property in the receiver toggles you between send receive and send only.
Well, only once you added a media stream, right? Now what it does is toggles you between receive only and inactive. Until you add a media stream, it's toggling.
Yeah, I agree. Well, in your outline you just gave is that somehow you get a media stream and you've already plugged it in. And
right. I guess the reason I'm pushing on this is because my understanding was part of the point of this little dance was to parallelize the DTLS and the user prompt for media stream acquisition.
Correct. No. It's the parallelize the DTLS and the actual user
and the call to action.
Yes.
Right, but that only works if you also have acquired persistent permission. Otherwise the user prompt is. Well, I guess I think so probably too. I'm just trying to walk the entire sequence, right? And so because if a place checks, the reason I'm saying I agree with you. So we're assuming that the guy's persistent permission is actually acquired. He's actually acquired the camera before the user's called it, before the user consented.
Or there's some way of manufacturing media stream tracks that then can be replaced tracks.
But that's exactly why I'm asking this, because wouldn't it be easier to just invent a dummy track which doesn't generate any video whatsoever, and then we didn't fuck around with this at all. Because as you were saying, the problem you had before was that you were generating RTP even if you were set to even if if it was just black, right? But that's the thing we could just fix. I don't mind this messing around with the RTP parameters, the doohickeys, but I want to make sure that that I understand the whole sequence of events and it actually matches up with the use case.
That's fair. One of the things to consider of why attaching sending blackness or attaching like a dummy stream or whatever might be problematic if it actually or if it causes like things to kick into action from the RTP standpoint is that bandwidth estimation a lot of times doesn't go well with like not sending data. And so that's one of the things that we want to be sure, if we're not sending at all, we're not even encoding or transmitting data, then that's not going to happen. So I agree that there are many sort of pieces of machinery here. You sort of sequence them all, but if we sort of set that aside and say well, let's assume we have persistent permissions, that removes some of the pieces and I think allows for some simplifying assumptions.
Oh. Okay, so at this point we're going to go to the remote speakers and have Tim and Randall go and then return to the line locally.
Yes, that is again why I'm up here.
I assumed that and I appreciated your acting as marker.
So Tim Panton, a meta question. How does this get into scope for 1.0?
Is this in scope for 1.0? Is that what the question was?
Yeah.
So as far as we have the RTP sender and receiver things already. So I think the exact 1.0 scope is not fully determined, but this is still within discussion for 1.0.
Okay, I just want to be clear that I think this is scope creep. I can see the need for it, but I think there are much cleaner ways of doing it in later revisions that we're not going to talk about here.
Okay, it would be interesting to sort of see your articulation of how this might be, how the ideal way of doing this might be done. If we think that there's a much better way of doing this, that might cause us to push this out of scope for 1.0.
Well, this is to do with coupling the transport and the media in ways that we don't, and then bundling it all into an SDP thing. And if we're not going down that line, then a lot of this stuff gets a lot easier because the transport and the media get decoupled.
Yeah. Okay.
In the API.
Yeah. If you're not using SDP, then you don't have some of these constraints that we're working with here.
So I want to push back on this being in scope.
Okay, so noted.
Okay, Randall is next, and then we'll return to the mic line in room.
Randall Jessup, Mozilla. I was originally in the line to say roughly the same stuff that Ecker was. I don't know that we need to go down this route, especially given the requirement to the requirements around permission being required ahead of time before this even occurs. Persistent permission is not something that everyone's going to have, and certainly won't have it the first time that someone interacts with a service. I'm not certain I want to tie this to requiring people to accept persistent permission. And I do believe there's an alternative solution that Ecker also, and was referred to, which would be to generate fake streams. You attach the fake streams to the peer connection. Video would just simply not generate any frames. Audio, you might have it generate silence for compatibility reasons. It won't take up much bandwidth. I think the bandwidth estimation stuff can be worked around, or would not be an issue, because it would be no different than the case of, let's say you're sending audio and not, blank audio and no video. It'd be no different than, I accepted with the camera off and then I turned the camera on case, which is something we need to handle anyways. And I think it uses API points and capabilities we've already established and agreed to. So I think that might be a simpler and more general solution than this.
Okay, I think that we probably need to understand exactly what that would look like. Like, how would you actually generate these dummy streams?
Now, in Firefox right now, we already have ways to generate dummy streams. They aren't necessarily exactly what we would use for this. There are certainly, you can generate and we've already agreed that you can generate a dummy stream from a canvas for video. And you just simply don't tell it to generate any frames using the appropriate API, and then it won't generate any frames. It could even be, if you really want to, you could the application could put something in there saying, waiting for user to accept. If you really want to generate a frame, it could send it. But that's up to the application. And as for audio, you could certainly generate a track via web audio by generating a silencing web audio. So you don't even need any new APIs or any new get user media options or anything else there to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the dummy thing might be an interesting part so that you don't actually have to have persistent permissions. However, I do think that we probably want to decouple media arriving from the stream versus the encoder actually being activated as far as what actually triggers media to being sent. So the dummy streams might be an important part of this the way this actually works, but I don't think that by itself is sufficient.
There's still an issue of deciding on the directionality, but this will solve an important part of the problem, I believe.
Sure.
Okay, Dan, you're next.
Dan Burnett. So some of Eric's comments actually brought up a question in my mind as I was looking at this. I don't know that you're clear enough between local and remote and sender and receiver, right? And offer and answer and where it's happening. So just looking at this right here. So the send only is coming in an answer from your remote party, right? So if that's true, then you wouldn't be setting the receiver locally in order to have the answer generated at the other side change, right?
And then this would be so at the callee side, the callee probs this active bit on its receiver, so that when it then generates the answer, it includes the send only bit.
Wouldn't that be a sender from its perspective?
Sorry?
Would that be a sender from its perspective?
No, because it's toggling its receiver, saying it doesn't want to receive, and then that causes send only being generated, which then causes the other side, the caller, to not actually transmit media. Send only. These things are confusing because it all depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. But in this case, send only is the right thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, basically, I think the right way to kind of get this stuff sorted out is I can take this to the list and kind of provide a more careful kind of a sequence diagram and a set of API calls.
Peter Thatcher. So I really like the idea that we separate what we negotiate with the other side versus what we control locally using other knobs. One option I've thought of that I don't know if it's a good idea, but what would happen if in add track you passed in a null track or just a null value? Would that work? And then you call replace track later on the RTP sender.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me, because really all you need to do is generate the sender. Just so that it exists and can be used for purposes of generating the answer and that sort of thing.
Then you could do this before you call get user media.
Right, and that doesn't require then dragging web audio or anything else to generate these dummies, which I think will be very useful.
And then you just call set track or replace track when you get the track.
Yeah, exactly. Last one.
Colin, I just wanted to address Tim's scope question. I mean, I think this has been in scope for a very long time. We've been always discussed the issue, and the issue we're running into right now is we need the way to basically be able to send black versus say send no RTP packets at all. That goes way back for years that we've been talking about that. If we had, that's what we're talking about here is adding that interface with, and it looks like we might have had some of that stuff, and we simplified it out of spec at one point in time, then we sort of put it back in, and maybe we confused what was happening with the SDP with what was happening with the RTP. So if we go, this type of use case and this type of being able to say that you're only going to send black or only going to send media has been in for a very long time. So I think this is clearly in scope.
Simon, maybe a dumb suggestion. Couldn't you send comfort noise frames?
That's equivalent to like muting. You mean? The question is, what do you use for video? Comfort video.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing.
I don't think we want to define what comfort video means, especially not without especially because the AD just left the room and she's our adult supervision. So
just the payload type for CM. The payload type for CN. That's it.
Pardon?
Just the payload type for CN. It's just signaling.
So yeah. So I guess I don't have a strong opinion about what the mechanics we use for this are, but I just want to state what I think the requirements are, which is that I don't want I don't think that the callee should have to acquire the camera before this can happen, or should have to either by prompting or not. I don't want my phone to be ringing and the green light to be on at the same time.
Your phone has a green light?
Huh?
Your phone has a green light?
Sorry, my laptop. I want my laptop to have.
I agreed.
Yeah. So I got lots of lights at this point,
Yeah, Jonathan, my inclination would be, Randall seems to think that he can figure out in JavaScript how to solve this problem entirely in JavaScript. So I would say just, other than that, don't do anything here. Or else anything you need to fix are things that need to be fixed in W3C and not here, which I'm also good with.
I'm probably dubious that this can be solved in JavaScript using the existing APIs we have now.
But if there are new APIs needed, this isn't the group where we just have to find what they are, right?
I think that's entirely fair, but I think at the same point in time, things that do have SDP implications, like, if we need APIs to control like A equals send receive and that sort of stuff, like, this is where we need to
the other possibility would be to say just, don't worry about it. Say, if you want to, just start sending media when the other guy's phone is ringing. That's what telephones do. That's what traditional landlines will send, I believe when, they will send media when the phone is ringing. So what?
You mean transmit from the caller to the callee?
Transmit from the caller while the callee is still ringing, yeah.
This is from the callee to the caller.
Well, yeah, that was why, you could, I'm not sure that gets you I'm not sure that solves the problem because, anyway, I'm not sure that solves the problem, but that might lead to its own set of weird things of your phone saying, hey, are you there? While it's ringing.
Okay, just as a time check, it's currently 5 minutes till. I'm going to call Randall Jessup to put his blue ghost onto the screen so that we can have him up at the end of this after Tim. Peter?
Yeah, so Tim Patterson, I just wanted to point out that what we're talking about here is about legacy interoperability. You can already do this if both ends are running WebRTC because you just spin up a data channel and you get your ICE and then you renegotiate based on that. So you're only talking about...
No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Because you still have the same issue where media will not be played out until you then still have an offer answer, which is what we're trying to avoid.
Okay. I still, yeah, I'm resenting spending time on this in Windows 0, but there you go.
Okay, so it's going to be Peter and then Randall.
Okay, so I was just going to say that I think this is way better, no matter what mechanics we end up with, than PR answer. So my question is, what happens to PR answer? You said we'd discourage it?
Yeah, PR answer is discouraged. There's no way to get away from it, I think, because of 180 ringing type situations. But let's, bound, and the goal has always been to bound it and keep it for the things that we have to keep it around for, but not recommend it certainly by any means of the way new applications should be built.
So there's no foreseeable future where I can delete that code from Chrome?
Well, there's always like 1.1.
Because that's a part of the code that's ugly. It'd be really nice if it went away.
So noted.
Oh, okay, so Randall, I guess there was an implied thing here I wish to have on the video, or at least in audio, that you would be willing to write up an alternative proposal based on dummy track. Is that something we did hear from you?
Yes, the implication is correct. I will happily write up the proposed alternative here and coordinate with Ecker and others to do so.
Okay, so I would like you to set a date by which the working group will have same.
I think I can. I will tell you I can have something written up. I'll have something written up for the list by next Friday.
Okay.
Is that good?
I would love it by tomorrow at about 11. But if next Friday is what
Tomorrow
would be
by
reasonable
11.
next Friday?
Tomorrow I can write up something by tomorrow at 11. Yeah.
Okay, so let's have that by tomorrow at 11. We're going to schedule some more time for JSEP tomorrow. We'll go through whatever comes up with pseudocode from Harold. We'll come up with whatever you write by tomorrow. And we'll see whether there's anybody who's wildly swayed by either of those. And we will probably have to take both issues to the list, but since we have some face-to-face time, let's take advantage of it. Thanks very much for accelerating to tomorrow by 11. Much appreciated.
In addition, I think Eric, Peter, and I can figure out, like, just get this drafted in more detail to address the concerns, and at least have like this proposal fully fleshed out.
Okay, that would be great. So we're going to add some more time tomorrow for JSEP. We apologize to the authors of draft Nanda Kumar that we did run over. We're going to rejigger the schedule for tomorrow to make sure that we get as much time as possible. Barring other business for the good of the order, I think we're closed for today. See you all tomorrow.
I don't know if it's conventional or even no, but you have the same nick as someone else and they send someone a private message. You're told you just send a private message to someone with the contents of the message, which is awesome.
You saw the images network.
Yes.
It's actually arguing out better than Jabber Chat. We just try to stop fucking with it.
And it works everywhere. It works in the title, it works in the nick.
It should work in the nick.
Oh, did you change it? It was working in the nick earlier.
I know. But the problem was
you could make it.
I thought about that.